Together, we are going to time travel. Imagine a space where you enjoyed spending time as a child under the age of 10. Close your eyes. Remember the space. Remember details. Go deeply into the mental map of that space. What things do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? Who's there? What did you do here? Open your eyes. Raise your hand if you remember a space that was outdoors. Okay, almost everybody. Raise your hand if you remember a space where adults were kind of around, but not really, and no adult was telling you what to do. Again, almost everybody. Raise your hand if the space that you remembered was not a traditional playground. Again, almost everybody. I remember playing in my room, rearranging sheets and pillows as sets for my toys. I was trying to create the conditions for play for myself, but also I thought for my Playmobiles as well. And somehow I turned that into a job that I get paid for. I am a playworker. You heard that right. It's a very new term, playworker. A playworker is someone who works to create the conditions for children's play. The practice originated on adventure playgrounds in the UK and Scandinavia, where kids work to create their own spaces, build their own equipment, so not a traditional playground. I have extended that work to think about play work in the context of museums, mostly for children, but also spaces for adults who have slightly different conditions for play. In all of it, I come back to the quote from Gordon Sturrock, a play worker, that trying to define play is like trying to define love. You can't do it. It's too big for that. And yet, in the stories that we tell in remembering spaces that we enjoyed as children, we start to do just that. We define play. We remember intricate creek beds that we could still create maps of to this day, 50 years from childhood. We remember spaces between buildings where water pooled up and suddenly a playground emerged. Or a corner of a bedroom where we could read and nobody would bother us. An 84-year-old man once described to me in great detail a ham radio that he used to play with. And in his basement, it became a place of refuge and also connection to the rest of the world in a somewhat challenging childhood. And a woman remembered as her space a small fabric bag that she carried with her when her family left the former Soviet Union to move as refugees to Massachusetts. In that bag, she would collect whatever she could, treasures that meant something to her. That was her space. In a continued crisis where adults might slip into depression, in moments where we feel out of control, a freely chosen play process can be an act of survival, a magic circle that accepts current constraints while refusing life-deadening compromise. Kids often locate play in the way that a newly born infant, still attached by an umbilical cord, crawls to its mother's breast. Now, the adventure playgrounds that I mentioned when we started began during World War II in bombed-out lots. Kids were playing in spaces of war and turmoil. And this continues. Play builds attachment and friendships. Play builds resilience, this everyday magic, so that you can cope with moments of great stress. Right now, children are playing in Gaza, even as genocide is waged. Play is this magic potion that reminds you of the fact that you are human, reminds you that you still have possibility in you. So why does this magic potion seem to disappear when we become adults? part of it is that we think of play as the opposite of work. We have this unexamined belief that these are opposites. Now, I'm a play worker, so I have some thoughts about this. So the play theorist Brian Sutton Smith talks about how play is not the opposite of work. Play is the opposite of depression. When we feel depression, we do less. When we feel a state of play, we want to do more. So it's not really one or the other. It's more of a spectrum. So even in this image, there might be two people who are playing. One person might be playing, one person might be working. It's really about that inner frame that makes the difference to you. About a couple weeks ago, I was on a science boat for work, for research for British Aquarium for 7 days. And a lot of things went wrong. We had, first of all, really rough seas. And it was kind of like, you know when you're a little bit hungry and you say, I could eat. It was like that, except it was like, I could puke at any given moment for 3 days straight. Then the lab flooded and equipment malfunctioned. It was hard and it should have been a terrible time. But instead, this amazing group of scientists and amazing crew somehow managed to play. Somebody created a pin the tail on the short-tailed shearwater game, which is difficult to do when the boat is moving so quickly. We danced. They made a contraption to collect seabird poop for eDNA analysis that we called the caca catcher. And ultimately, when we were plagued by thousands of flies, because what else could go wrong, we made homemade fly swatters, and we whacked as many of them as we could while listening to apocalyptic music and heavy metal. I was reflecting on why that was possible, and a big part of it was the power dynamics. This is a group of graduate students, one undergrad, random aquarium exhibit person. There was nobody's thesis advisor on board. There was nobody who was saying that you had to meet this deadline, and yet we got a lot done. We got the data that we needed while having a really great time. Now recently, an encampment of students bravely, students and faculty took over a space here on the UC San Diego campus, and that also was a place of play. Some of you may have seen it. People danced dabka. People made signs. People brought out letterpress. It was a beautiful space. In the middle of challenge, in the middle of fighting against what is wrong, there is moments for playfulness. Gordon Burkhart calls play a mutant strategy. That is, it's a frivolous activity that uses energy and increases the probability of dying with no direct fitness benefit. So another example of a mutant strategy is a blue lobster. It's a mutation. It's very rare. Typically, you have more of a brown mottled color, but you get this blue lobster like this. Now, a blue lobster stands out. They're exposed to more predation. And I think the same thing is true for a playful adult. It can have consequences. If you are a playful adult in the boardroom and there is this belief that play is the opposite of work, you're going to be seen as sometimes less than. There's hazard in it. And I want to stay there for a moment. I think we fear play as adults because play is not about becoming. Play is not about striving. Play is about being. Here, now, as we are, not as we should be. So imagine a world where people could play, where you could do the unmasking and the vulnerability that play requires. If you think of famous players now, you're going to be thinking of people who can afford to be that blue lobster. But what if everybody could? Gordon Sturrock and Perry Else, playworkers, talk about the state of play, the frame of mind, as the metalude. Metalude is a place of possibility. It's a frame of mind. When you remember the space that you enjoyed as a child under the age of 10, you probably were in a metalude, the ability to see things as they could be. So let's use Sturrock and Else's play cycle as an example for how we might be able to recognize more play cues in our lives as adults. Let's say you're in the metalude. You are in a playful state. Maybe there's some people around. Imagine a space that you enjoy now as an adult, right? There's humans there. There might be some pets around. There might be a piece of paper. All those things can invite you to play. So the person might tell a joke. The cat might look at you hopefully. The paper, you might see it as what it could be, a paper airplane. And that's the play return. So you throw the ball for the cat, you return a joke to the person, you fold that paper airplane. Now we've created a play frame. Play requires trust, play requires negotiation, play requires us to really think about the world around us in a new way. So that moves on to play flow. And this is where you self-handicap. Maybe you decide to imagine that you can only throw that paper airplane over the couch. Or maybe you imagine that suddenly the floor is lava. Or maybe you imagine that the cat is now a tiger. You've gone into a whole other place in just moments, just in your mind. This continues until annihilation, where something stops the play, something inhibits you, but the metalude never goes away. The metalude stays with you. Now, my applied work in play is attempting to design spaces that, for just a little while, get you into that metalude, get you into a different way of being. This is the Wonder Sound by Wes Bruce at the New Children's Museum, a 3-story space full of rooms with spoons hanging from the ceiling and language that we created that only exists here. And this is the contradiction. I find that the more I work to design spaces to provide the conditions for play, the more people seem to be learning about themselves, about each other, and about the world around them. And another contradiction, the more I think about play, the more I understand it as a thing with no specific purpose, something unfrivolously frivolous, the more I realize how much we're going to need it in the future, this resilience-building mutant strategy. Hard times are coming. Hard times are here in the form of genocide, climate crisis, polycrisis worldwide. In changing circumstances that make us feel the newness that we felt as a child when everything was changing around us, we will be wanting and needing the locus of control, the opposite of depression that play gives us. For kids and adults, for all and not just the privileged few. For the in-between times of everyday life, not just something that you save up for vacation, not something that you do on the weekends, but in the everyday nooks and crannies of our lives. Close your eyes again. Go back to that space that you enjoyed as a child under the age of 10. What was that spark that little you had in being able to see the world around you as a place of possibility? What was that spark that allowed you to see both as things are, a rational hope to understand that things might not be great, and yet there is still room for more? Open your eyes. My fellow mutants, welcome to finding your way back to the metalude. Thank you.